Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? It's your boy, Jonathan Macri, with you for another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. Coming at you, recording this at 8:09 p.m. on Sunday night, November 27th. So the 76ers' next loss is not yet officially in the books. Just had to open with that. They're down by 24 to the Rockets, to the Clippers at home. Things are going great in Philly. But we are not here to talk about the Sixers, as much fun as that would be for the next 45 minutes. We do need to discuss the local basketball team, the team that was riding high, riding all of the vibes, right up to the sun and the stars and all the moon and everything else. And then they came back down to earth a little bit, which I brought on, of course, the one and only Benjy Ritholtz to help me process the latest, underwhelming performance in a season that has contained a few underwhelming performances. Benjy, how are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing all right. Just prepping for the West Coast, the hours that requires, I guess. Hoping that they don't lose a bunch of games, because that's always really depressing when you stay up really late and then they lose.
Yeah.
So hoping that doesn't happen over the course of the next next week, I guess. But I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm okay. And before we talk about the Knicks, I do need to make one very quick announcement, and I need you to just bear with me, and all of our listeners to bear with me for a second. I need to issue a congratulations to the 2024-25 girls volleyball PSAL champion Lady Jaguars of the school that I have taught at for the last decade. They won the city championship in their division, Division 1A, earlier today at the Borough Manhattan Community College in a thrilling 3-set match against a very, very good school from the upper west side of Manhattan. And it was the most thrilling athletic event that I have seen in some time. It was a nail biter. The third set with the final score was 25-23. And for anybody who doesn't know the rules of volleyball, you have to get 25 to win. So, yeah, have to issue that. Congratulations.
That's awesome. Congrats. That's huge. Love that.
Very, very cool. Especially there are several graduating seniors that have kind of helped the program rise to this level of prominence, and including 2 that I have written letters of recommendation for college. So that was, and they're the 2 kind of co-captains of the team. So it was nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So despite the fact that we're here talking about the Knicks after a loss, I have a little pep in my step today. So that's how I'm doing, Benjy. But we can't talk about the volleyball game for the rest of the time that we have here. We have to talk about the Knicks, which I was all excited to come and hopefully be riding a 5-game winning streak, even if I knew in my heart that if they had gone into Utah and let's say they were the team that shot, over 50% from 3, and the Jazz had the sort of night that they've been having a lot of this year where they didn't shoot particularly well, and the Knicks, won the game that we've all expected them to win, I would know in my heart that it's not like all the problems would have been solved, but I would be feeling a little bit better than I am today. And I, said a lot of things on the post game, which was not as negative as I thought it would be. So given that I have already shared all of my thoughts from the Utah game, I'm just going to start by asking you, in light of the Knicks' most recent performance, what are your most prescient thoughts, sir?
It's so easy to overreact to these games when you're in it and you're invested in it. I don't think all that much has changed in my assessment of the team yet at all. I think from the beginning of the season, I think this is essentially where I thought it would start, and has continued to go. And, I think you look at a game like the Utah game. So it's extremely rare and unlikely that you shoot 17 more threes than an opposing team and you make 2 less of them, especially considering the quality of looks the Knicks got. I don't think any of us would argue that the Jazz got significantly better looks. Honestly, I'd argue the looks were not as good. I think they made a bunch of tough ones.
Sexton and Markkanen in particular.
Yeah. Markkanen's a great shooter, but
yes,
they made a bunch more like coming off of screens.
Yep.
The Knicks missed a bunch of open looks last night. And I think you can analyze the game in a lot of ways, but you have to start there. You have to, in good faith, start there. And I think if this game was played 10 more times, the Knicks would make 7, 8 more threes than the Jazz on average, and they probably win the game. That is not to say the Knicks played great. They did not play great. Their defense remains a concern. Their offense, I think, is really excellent. I think you do have to get used to, with the increasing reliance on the three-pointer, which I think is a good thing in net because I think it's a good shooting team. There's going to be more variance. They're not going to win. It's harder to win kind of through the grinding possession battle when they don't get as many offensive rebounds as they used to. It's become a field goal percentage dependent team in a sense. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but it is different. And you're going to get some losses over the course of a year where it's just like the shots didn't go. And Karl-Anthony Towns was due for a regression because he was shooting 50-something% from the field, from three. And so, the defense still needs work. They're not there yet. They're not a contender yet with the defense that they have. This game, though, what it really comes down to, the reason they lost the game was because the three-pointers didn't go in. I know it's a boring answer and maybe not the most informative one, but that's kind of where I net out.
And to your point about field goal percentage dependent, I agree with you, but wouldn't you also have to say that with that caveat, amongst the teams that they could play when the threes are not falling, Utah, for as bad as their defensive rating is, if Kessler's in there, is probably one of the worst teams that you could have to play when your threes are not falling.
It's 2 straight years where Kessler pretty much dominated them in Utah. I mean, that guy's really good. There's a reason the Knicks really wanted him, really, really wanted him and tried to get him. He is a traditional but very, very solid, especially defensive, but even pretty solid on offense center. And he did a lot of good stuff for them. I thought Karl-Anthony Towns couldn't make anything at the rim last night. I think that was a lot because of Kessler being a beast. And then, when the Knicks got aggressive in their coverages defensively and they brought their defense up, there was some success. They forced a lot of turnovers, but on the back end, they gave up some offensive rebounds and some easy duck-ins for Kessler. I agree with you that he, in a game where you're not making your shots, having a guy like Kessler on the opposing team is going to hurt you even more in a game like that. Yeah.
So with no one should be worried about this offense. And I don't think anyone is worried about this offense. The offense, I was thinking of doing, bringing some of my teaching practice into the pod today as kind of a gimmick. Sometimes in teaching, you have kids do a KWL chart, which is things you know, things you wonder, and things you have learned. But then I'm like, no, I don't know if there's enough to fill out a whole chart. But it's we know that the Knicks offense is awesome. And I think we've talked about it a lot. We've talked about the different ways that it's awesome. I'm curious to see how they will do against the better switching teams in the league. Although it is interesting, and there's the last thing I'll say about the offense, and then we'll spend time on the defense because that's what I was curious about. We were all fretting, I think, early in the year about the losses to Boston, Cleveland, and Houston with their switchability. Might those be 3 of the best? I don't know, switchable teams in the league in terms of defense, best 5, whatever.
I don't think there's any doubt about it. And I think it's probably the case that in the modern NBA, the best defenses will have some switchability, some degree of switchability. I think that is becoming almost a necessity to be a great defense, is to have the ability to switch amongst various positions. Even Cleveland, who has rim protection, a lot of rim protection, they're switching a ton. Because it's the best way to negate all the advantage creation that's available on every offense now in the league. Multiple ball handlers, multiple ways to put pressure on you. So I think switchability is really important. And I think those 3 teams are going to be amongst the 10 best defenses in the league, partially because of that switchability. But we have to see another test like that. I'll be curious to see, because I do think the offense has grown over the course of the season.
Oh yeah.
And gotten better, and their reads are getting better, and they've found some solutions against switching. especially using Cat as kind of a hub at the elbows and split cutting off of that. And they're doing some really good stuff because the Nets switched a lot. They're not good defense, but they do switch a lot. And the Knicks kind of punished it. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to the next kind of real defensive minded switchable team that comes along in the schedule. Now, you can tell me who that might be.
I was about to say I kind of know the schedule in my head, and I'm thinking to myself, like, when actually is it? We may have to wait.
Yeah, like I know Dallas's defense has been excellent this year. I do think they switch a good bit, but I'm not sure that's the type of defense we're talking about. We'll see when the next test is. But
they're playing Orlando on
there it
December 3rd.
There's your answer.
Yeah,
There's your answer. There's your answer, and it'll be good to see.
Presuming they can take care of business, we shouldn't presume anything, but presuming they can take care of business in what will be a tough game, because the fifth game of a road trip is always tough against Charlotte. That Orlando game is going to be for the right to be or get into the NBA Cup. So if that matters to you, which I know it matters a lot to you, Benjy, and I would never.
Damn right, it matters. Stakes, baby. Create those stakes. I'm all in.
Create them out of thin air. The defense. What is the thing that is most concerning to you right now?
I just don't think they've found solutions yet. I think they've tried a lot of different things, and I just don't know if they've come up with any real answer to, man, we got two below average defenders at the point guard and center who have to play the most minutes on our team, or actually they don't. I shouldn't say that. They don't play the most minutes on the team, but they have to be on the floor a lot. And when they play together, there are two pressure points that we can't really solve for yet. And I think, look, Mikal Bridges not quite being who we thought he would be defensively remains an issue. I thought actually he was pretty good defensively against Utah. Obviously, offensively, he was much of a disaster, but defensively, I thought he got his hand on a lot of balls. I thought he was disruptive. I thought it was one of his better defensive games, but he hasn't quite lived up to what we expected. And so he can't make up for what is a foundational issue with the defense. And no scheme yet has solved it. Now we're still early and they're still looking and searching and trying to find, and they've had some stretches. I'm not giving up. But what's concerning about the defense is it's not good because the personnel is lacking. Like it is basic and it's a boring answer, but that is the answer.
So I'm going to throw out some numbers as Benjy gives his expertise. Mikal Bridges' current on-off number in terms of defense, this is all these numbers are via cleaning the glass. The Knicks are 11.8 points per 100 possessions worse, meaning they're giving up 11.8 points per 100 possessions more. That sounds awful, and it is the 5th percentile league-wide. However, in the course of, I want to say, the last week to 10 days, something in that neighborhood, maybe 8 days, it has like been cut in half because they were like 21 points per 100 possessions worse. So he, over that, again, it's a small sample size, but it is trending for Mikal Bridges specifically in the direction that you want. So I wanted to just throw that out there. Before we go to the scheme, I do want to ask you something about Brunson, because Brunson has been on the floor for I don't want to say a lot, for a number of successful defensive stretches, just like we saw him last year on the floor for several defensive stretches. So in my mind, it is, as you said, a Brunson and Towns problem, not necessarily a problem that can't be overcome when only, let's leave it with Brunson for now, when only Brunson's on the floor. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, considering this team has now learned over the course of 2 years how to cover for Jalen Brunson.
Yes.
It's something they've done. They know exactly how to do it. They've played that game. They know that when Brunson's man goes to screen, Brunson's going to show, and you have to rotate out of that. And they understand that Brunson likes to go under a lot of screens and how to navigate that at the point of attack. Like, that's something they've handled. And that's besides the fact that a center is just a different being defensively than a guard. And Cat has to be in the action a lot, whereas Brunson, they can at least try to avoid it. And
because he's guarding the screener.
Because Cat's guarding the screener.
Yes, Cat's guarding
whereas Brunson, if they bring his man into the action, it's usually a poor offensive player that you're like, all right, fine, bring him into the action, because Brunson's guarding the worst player on the other team. That's not the case for Cat. So it's a fundamentally different issue when it's your center, but it's also not something the Knicks have dealt with. They're used to having the back line of defense be as strong as there is in the league. And now it isn't. It is something totally different. And I think when Cat isn't on the floor, and I've looked at these numbers, I don't know them offhand, so maybe you can tell me, but I'm pretty sure that it's the case that when Brunson's on and Cat's off, the defense has been better. When both of them are on, it's been pretty bad. And I don't think that is altogether surprising when you consider what I just talked about in terms of what the team is used to dealing with, and then the different problems that having a center who struggles defensively presents to your defense.
So Brunson on, Cat off. It's funny you should bring that up because I literally just wrote a footnote about it in the newsletter, which I stole a few clips from you. But I what I do now is I just screenshot your whole tweet. So it's not like I don't screenshot just the clip.
I wasn't upset.
Well, I always like to give credit where credit is due.
I appreciate that, man. I appreciate it.
The Knicks in 374 possessions with Brunson on the court and Cat off the court. So not an insignificant sample size. They're giving up 112.1 points per 100 possessions.
Well, I wouldn't do for that.
66th percentile league wide. They're
great.
They're +9. Because they're scoring 121. Like here's the thing about this offense. And I've been the one shouting from the rooftops, and I think you kind of have too. Like, keep Cat at the 5. Moving Cat off the 5 is the last resort. The worst piece of evidence against what we're saying, and again, this is regular season basketball, it's not playoff basketball, so big asterisk here. They're scoring no matter who's on the freaking court. Like, Cat's on the court, Cat's off the court. Brunson off the court, sometimes it gets a little dicey, but even then, when they have their guys. Anyway, so that's been good. So then, all right, let's turn to Towns. I know you've watched a lot of Karl-Anthony Towns over the course of his career, so I feel comfortable asking you this question, which is, I feel like we have seen Cat more in the aggressive scheme that they've been running the last few weeks than in drop. Have some really nice moments when he's been active and his hands are out and he's moving his feet and he's doing the things that you do if you want to be a good defender in the NBA. And then there are games like the Utah game where, again, I'm going to just turn it to you because you clipped a great one where he just lets, who the hell was it, go around the corner like he wasn't even there.
George.
There was another play. I wrote it down. It was the first possession I mentioned on the post game where he came in the fourth quarter and he goes to hedge and it accomplishes nothing. Like nothing is taken away. Do you think that inconsistency is just like, that's just always going to be him? Or is there a chance that this gets better? Is he like, it's a long season and we're in November and I'll save it till April? Like how do you read that part of it?
It's hard to argue after a decade in the league that there's something fundamental that's going to change. That doesn't happen so often. Like, he is very much a veteran. And
yes.
It's not like nobody's focused on these issues. Every coach he's had, the number one focus of that coach, I would think, was how do we build a defense around Karl-Anthony Towns at the 5? And nobody's figured it out to the point, and I know I've said this before, but I think it's worth repeating, that the general manager brought in one of the most expensive centers in basketball because he didn't think that Karl-Anthony Towns, his $50 million a year investment, could guard well enough at the 5. I don't know. You watch him defensively, and it's not like watching Jonas Valanciunas.
No,
where the dude's feet are just stuck in mud, and they always will be. His instincts and his fundamentals are just bad. Like, his stances are bad. He's not in the right stance when his guy goes to screen, and he's not paying attention sometimes. And when you lose that second, and the Keontae George play that I clipped is a perfect example. It's like, this was a dribble handoff where all he had to do, really, if he's in the proper stance and he's ready, it's just one freaking slide to your left to square him up. But once he gets by you, once his shoulder's by your shoulder as a defender, and he's not like a great shot blocker, it's over. It's either a foul or a bucket. And it happens to him so often where it's not like It's not like it's something he should be able to do. And this is where you hear people talk about it throughout his career. Zach Lowe always talked about it. He's like, I don't understand how someone who's so fleet of foot on the offensive end could be this bad defensively. And now I'm like really experiencing it, watching every possession. And I feel that frustration. I know you can beat him to that spot. I've watched you switch onto dudes and stymie them for 20 seconds. You played the 4 last season. You guarded wings. You guarded Kevin Durant in the playoffs. You can't. You're telling me that you can't slide to square up Keontae George on a basic dribble handoff? Like, it doesn't make sense. And that said, I don't know. It's been a decade and nobody's figured it out. And he doesn't seem to have. He's missing something intangible, an instinct, a feel. He just isn't good in pick and roll defense. It's like, and. Can they solve for it through other things? I think it's going to require Mikal Bridges to be the best version of himself and fly around the court and force more turnovers. And I thought that was an encouraging thing about the Utah game is they finally really forced a lot of turnovers and got a lot of deflections. I think part of that is because Utah is prone to a lot of turnovers. But I also thought that some of the ball pressure possessions, especially on the 17-0 run, Hart was on the ball and getting steals, and OG was all over the place, and Bridges got in passing lanes. Like, that is the vision. Like, you might give up a bunch of easy buckets and pick and roll, but can you force enough turnovers? Can you cause enough chaos? And can you get solid enough in whatever coverage you choose to just get to league average? Right? Like that remains the battle. And right now, that hasn't come together.
So I'm bouncing around here, but one thing that I do think is somewhat notable. There are some good numbers defensively with Karl-Anthony Towns on the court.
All right, talk to me.
You have to search a little bit to get so again, I knew this was going to be a conversation centered around him and Mikal Bridges. When him and Mikal Bridges are on the court together, the Knicks are giving up 120.4 points per 100 possessions. That's an atrocity against humanity. Bridges without Towns, for whatever it's worth, 116.1. So not great. To be very clear, like, again, Bridges has not cloaked himself in glory here throughout this early going, but like, that's better. Towns without Bridges, this I found a little notable, 109.3 defense. Now it's only 159 possessions, so it's not a ton. And if you go and look at some NBA.com stats, which is just easier to look at a whole bunch of lineups and group them by 3 or 4 men. When he's with McBride, there's some good stuff. You could find some good lineups when he's out there defensively with McBride. And I just think about it. And again, I'm thinking a little bit about our conversation last time we spoke about, like, we were talking about getting McBride in the starting unit. Except now it's like, you know what Kevin Danishevsky asked during the postgame last night?
I didn't get a chance to hear it, so no. But
I figured you were not going to stick around for all the comments. He's like, I think it was Kevin. No, it wasn't Kevin Danishevsky. How could I confused our two most frequent super chatters. It was Robert Cross. One loon for another. I love you both, but I mean, seriously. Robert Cross was like, "Is it time to bench Mikal Bridges for Deuce?" And I was like, "No, it's not time to do that."
Apparently, it was time to bench Mikal Bridges for campaign. In the last that is something that happened. That is, maybe we're glossing over it because the game wasn't all that close. That is a huge deal. Maybe something we should have talked about earlier. So that is a huge deal. That is the first time THIBS has kind of admitted, man, this guy's not playing very well. And maybe the patience ran out for a 5-minute stretch at the end of the game. I know Campaign was playing really well.
He was.
But again,
and he was making shots.
There's politics. You traded 5 first-round picks for this dude, and you just sat him down the stretch of a game. That's a big deal. Something to keep an eye on.
So now we're back over to the Bridges part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Well, let me finish the McBride point. So whatever. I think the part of McBride, because McBride is for all the minutes that, I mean, obviously McBride is not a starter, but he plays with Towns a lot, especially during the minutes where Towns is not, out there with Brunson. So I think his absence has been felt. Again, that's not going to solve the starting unit issue. We'll get back to Bridges in a second. It just seems like the starting 5 as a whole, and the only scheme they haven't tried yet is just switching a lot more. It's the last thing.
Yeah.
There's a lack of activity right now.
And zone.
Well, Tom Thibodeau will be in his grave before this team runs. And
this team may be 30th in defense. So at some point they got to do something.
Well, so what do you think? Would you try that? Because you just mentioned you talked about how Towns, like, we've seen him on an island and like survive.
Would I try switching?
Yeah.
Yes, I do more of it.
Okay.
Yes. 100%. 100%.
Do you,
like, with very few reservations.
Do you think that is something that he will try? Because this team has switched less than probably any team in basketball since he's taken over as head coach.
I don't know the answer to that. I would say that if we're 25, 30 games in and they are where they are defensively and he doesn't try more of it, then he's failing at his job. At some point, you can argue execute better. Okay. But I this is an experiment to some extent. The Eastern Conference stinks. You have some wiggle room here, maybe less and less, but you do have some wiggle room here to try stuff. The stuff you're doing isn't working. I think it's incumbent upon you to try to get a look at a sample size of switching and what that looks like for your team. I feel very strongly about that. I've said that from the beginning of the season. I think switching needs to be a part of the solution. I think it probably requires a combination of a bunch of coverages and then communicating those coverages well throughout a game. But I think switching has to be a part of it. And we haven't really seen that at all. I mean, how many times has Towns switched over? I don't know, less than 10 onto a guard.
Who was the guard? He had the one really nice. You clipped it. I'm pretty sure you clipped it, or maybe it was DJ.
No, it was me. It was. I'm blanking on who it was.
I'm blanking too. It may have been. Was it a Wizard? Was it a Net? Was it a Bull? It was something in the last few weeks, but it was really nice. He could do it. Like, we know he could do it. Like, you just said it. I don't know. The counter, and what I think Tibbs will tell you if you asked him is, look, Towns has rebounded really great. Yeah.
And they have some size issues after Towns because they're playing no one's a great rebounder in the lineup other than Hart for his size, obviously, but Hart's a different kind of rebounder. He's not like the box out guy. He's the guy that flies in from the perimeter. So now if he's underneath because Towns is out switching, how does your rebounding hold up? It's a fair question. It's one that I think they need to figure out and then solve for it. And then so that it becomes part of your repertoire that you can throw at a team defensively. I feel very strongly about that. I mean, to your Deuce point, I do think with Towns being aggressive in coverage, right? So he's jumping out at the ball. If your point of attack defender is not attached to the ball handler when he comes off that screen as Towns is hedging out, so you're essentially leaving Towns out on an island, right? And we've seen Bridges die on too many screens, so that there's separation between the ball handler and Bridges, which now leaves the ball handler essentially in a switch, although Towns isn't really switching. He's trying to recover, and that's where disaster strikes, right? So I don't think the sample size is quite big enough to draw any obvious conclusions. What I will say is watching Deuce, I think Deuce has been their best point of attack defender this year. I think he's been much better than Mikal Bridges. And so it's not shocking that the numbers with Deuce attached to a ball handler in those pick and rolls is better than with Mikal Bridges. So maybe there's something there.
Well, let's turn it to Bridges, and then we'll each, because we've covered a lot. So I'm curious where we'll land on our one big takeaway before we get to game ball. The Towns, the whole Towns conversation we just had, as you implied, there's been a lot of podcasters over in Minnesota have been having this conversation for the last decade.
That's right.
None of this is new information. He is one of the most transcendent offensive players who has ever stepped foot in the league, and one of the most frustrating defensive players because of the things that you feel like he should be able to do and just doesn't do. None of this is, if this is shocking you, if any of this is shocking you, then you probably haven't been paying attention. The Bridges stuff, and this is kind of why I asked you the question the way I asked it to you before, that is a little shocking, and I don't even know if we can, like, this has gone beyond like, oh, it's the shooting form. It's like the point of it's like, I hate that I have to give him credit, but Fred Katz has been using the word weird all season long. it is kind of weird. It is kind of weird, whatever is going on with Mikal Bridges right now.
Yeah. I believe in my notes for the game, my grades, I just wrote, Bridges.
Yeah.
This is not, there's something up. There's something up. He doesn't look right. His ball handling doesn't look right. There were a couple of plays last night where he threw it to the other team. He lost it in transition. Like, he does not look confident going to the basket at all. He's relying a ton on that mid-range game, which, yes, has been successful and was also bound to regress a little bit and is not the shot you want him relying on. I mean, it's a nice weapon to have.
It's a tool. It's a vital tool.
But at the end of a shot clock, you're attacking to be able to pull up and make a shot is great. But man, like, you can't not have any free throw attempts, and you can't be unable to make it above the break three. It is definitely weird. I never pushed back on Fred saying Mikal Bridges was weird. I pushed back on him saying like the Knicks season is weird because I don't think other than Bridges, this season has been. Look, we analyze this team going in. Nothing about this start is surprising other than Mikal Bridges looking like not himself, and I don't know what is going on.
But you think so? The benching to you, that raised your eyebrows.
Yes. Oh, yes. Because Tom Thibodeau, more than any coach that I know, loves his wings, man. Like, that guy will live in, he's been doing it forever. Luol Deng played 40 gazillion minutes, and Jimmy Butler played 40 gazillion minutes, and OG Anunoby now plays 40 gazillion minutes, and they always close the game because there's nothing more valuable to Tom Thibodeau than a two-way wing. Nothing. For his whole, and that is, and Mikal Bridges came here as the second best two-way wing to the guy that you already have in OG Anunoby, outside of like star, you know what I mean? Like 3-and-D role player, great wings. It's OG and Mikal. And the whole point of this was that you just got the two best in the league. And that to me was like, those two are closing every game forever and ever, as long as they're here. And I think to bench him in a game that wasn't out of reach. I mean, it was. If it was closer, maybe he doesn't do that, and maybe it was like, look, we got to get some threes up, and Campaign's making shots, and I think that's probably right. But even so, I think it's a big deal. I think it's a big deal, like a recognition that this is not going the way it's supposed to be going from the coach, which we haven't had yet. So yeah,
it's interesting because I went on a little rant after the game about that he should have given Sims a little bit more minutes. But I did wonder about, in terms of if he had put Towns on the bench at any point late in the fourth quarter, because those guys have had some trust issues in the past. Does that open up a can of worms that maybe to Thibodeau was not worth it in that moment? And it didn't even cross my mind, the Bridges thing, and it should have.
Presumably Mikal Bridges, like, I shot, what did he shoot? 3 for 17?
3 for 15. Oh, I thought it was 15, but whatever.
I mean, that's uniquely horrendous. So there's like a pretty easy, like, look, man, you just don't have it tonight aspect to it that maybe doesn't get to Bridges in a way that would be harmful to overall chemistry or his confidence. I don't know. Like, I'm not under the hood. Like, I don't know. And I don't think he would do it to Cat. Certainly not yet in November, because of the history, because of who he is, obviously the money he makes. Like, and
he's been one of the 10 best offensive players of the sport.
He's been awesome. Yeah. More than I didn't understand the first half. I did not understand. It really felt like he forgot. Like, Towns played, I think, like the whole second quarter in Utah, not playing well at altitude, when Sims was like great and was like plus 11 in the first quarter. Like, it was legitimately odd. Like, we defend, and like, I'm generally like, minutes are the minutes, and he trusts his guys. Like, that was very, very odd. And Towns was gassed at the end of the half. He couldn't move. Like, what? It was very strange. Don't know what was going on there. You know, someone said to me, look, Johnny Bryant used to be the guy that used to go to him and be like, hey, man, like, that's a lot of speculation that he's not here anymore. And maybe that's I don't know. I will not say that with any degree of confidence, but as a theory, it's interesting to me that, like, maybe nobody's going up to him and like, hey, man, like, we're in Utah. Towns has played 18 straight minutes. Like, maybe get him a breather. Sims looks good out there.
It's especially strange considering he has, and this is not something he has done. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think he's done this with any star player or really any player of note before this year, unless you want to count RJ, which he kind of did this with RJ occasionally, but the 2 stints on the bench in 1 half, where he brings Towns back in, then he sits him back on the bench before bringing him in later in the
I love that they've been doing that because they've really staggered Brunson and Towns, which I think is great. It makes a lot of sense. And I think it's been innovative the way he's done that. And yeah, that's what I mean. It was almost like he forgot. Yeah. And that is concerning, but at the same time, like I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and hopefully like something like that doesn't happen again. But it was, I don't know, man. That was very odd. And now Cat's questionable for Denver. So I don't know what that's about.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about Denver in a moment. First, let's go. Let's each do our one big thing. So one big takeaway, presented by our friends at Juan Please. You could follow Juan Please at Drink Juan Please. You could also go ahead and check out their website, Drink Juan Please, for information on where you could pick yourself up some cans of Juan Please. I mentioned to Benjy before the show that I was, well, actually, listeners of this pod know I was sick last week. I'm still not quite back around to drinking. I trust that when the Knicks get a big road win one of the next couple of days, I will be ready to crack open a delicious one, please, after that, as has become tradition this year. My one big takeaway for this week is that despite what you just said about we should have seen pretty much all of this coming, Bridges stuff aside, my one big takeaway, I think, is that this is going to be a longer process than we may have anticipated to get themselves settled into how they want to play, into who they want to play with who, and all of that sort of stuff. And maybe it involves a player or something that is not currently on this roster. And maybe this goes into trade season and we don't see the version of the team that the front office thinks is like, okay, we're good now. Maybe there's a chance we don't see it this year, but I'm not putting that out there yet because we have a transaction cycle before. I know it's going to be a tough transaction cycle to navigate because of the apron stuff. But, I think Utah was like, for as good as we were maybe feeling about things for the week leading up to that game, Utah was like the splash of cold water. Like, no, this is just, it's going to be something that it's going to take you guys a while.
Yeah, I think that's a fair takeaway. Mine, I'm gonna give a shout out in mine to my man Anthony, who's the craziest thing. He's a security guard at my local train station. Very nice. I stepped off the train one night, like later, because he does like a late shift, and he's like, "Hey, Benjy," and I'm like, "Hey, man," and he's like, "We need Precious," and I was like, "Oh, hey, man, who are you?" And he introduced it. So now he's a loyal listener to Knicks Film School.
Shout out to Anthony. What's going on, man?
Super, super cool. So, and that was that. He's right. You know what? He's right. And I'll tell you what, like, I don't know what's going on with that injury, and it seems to be lingering, but I do think he's going to inject certain things into this team. And I do think that he's going to play with Towns a little bit, which might solve some defensive problems. And I'm curious to see how it looks, but man, they just need a little bit more juice off that bench. I know Sims has been good. Campaign's been really good. Deuce will be back. But to have Precious on the defensive end, who's so switchable and so versatile, and then have him do his thing on the offensive end, like he's good with the dribble handoffs. He's good with getting some offensive rebounds for this team that they've been lacking a little bit. Play a little bit of 4, play a little bit of 5, a little just lineup versatility. I'm starting to feel that. I feel like Precious is going to be a nice injection of energy and versatility into the lineup. So shout out to him. Shout out to Precious Achiuwa. Get well soon. We'd like to have you back in the lineup.
Before we do game ball, real quick, it's unfair for me to throw this at you after we just had this whole conversation. We can make this quick. You don't need to give a detailed explanation, but just like kind of yes or no. Is there a world where you could see them bringing in And I hope Precious solves a lot of issues too. And I think he will. And I'm very high on Precious.
Yeah.
But only because we're getting closer to when trade season is going to be a thing. Is there a world where they bring in a certain type of center where you think it would not diminish the offense too much, but it might solve a decent number of the problems on defense?
Oh man,
perhaps a stretch five. Like how much does that actually?
I think that would have to be a stretch five to make it interesting to me.
Okay.
I think it would have to be a stretch five to make it interesting to me. And that said, there's probably not a stretch five in the league, unless you consider like Wembanyama a stretch five.
Well,
maybe Chet, but like, there's not a stretch five that's even in the realm of possibility the Knicks can get. That I think if you had that stretch five on our team, that the center would guard Towns still. Like if it's a name out there, Miles Turner, who the Pacers just won tonight against the Wizards, wasn't a convincing win.
It was not.
Let's say Miles Turner became available and Miles Turner came to this team. Now that's it. I really like Miles Turner. I think Miles Turner is super underrated. I think he's really good. And I think with better defensive personnel around him, he's been a really good defensive player in his career. Like, even though the Pacers situation hasn't necessarily brought that out. If he was the starting center for this team and Cat was the 4, I don't think any team would put their 5 on Cat and their 4 on Turner. And so if the purpose of this is that we force 5s to guard Cat, I don't think there's a center out there that would come to the Knicks and you still would, and you'd avoid that issue, right? That said, if this proves to be problematic, if we get to the trade deadline and like they have not solved anything here, at what point do the Knicks already pivot from what was a hugely impactful offseason? Like the chips were put in with a vision in mind, presumably. Like, do you think they'll pivot off that vision trade deadline of 25? Like, that seems quick. But if things are, I don't know, what's your thought on that? Like how quickly will this front office be willing to just like cut their losses and say it's not working? Let's do something else. I don't know the answer to that question.
I think the more interesting question to me is, because the thing I keep coming back to is when push comes to shove in the playoffs against the best teams, you have this thing that no one, again, I know the switching defenses can give them fits, but like no one should be able to stop. There's no defense that has that you can't stop it. Like if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and they're executing at a pretty decent level, you can't stop the offense with Cat at the 5. And that is your trump card. You have that trump card. And only you could take it away from yourself, and you may need to by necessity. I guess my question is more like, how much do you need to play that in a 48-minute game, in a 7-game series, like, you know, and like all these different things we're talking about, some hedging, some drop, some switching. It's one thing if you're talking about navigating. How many minutes is the starting 5 playing right now per game? Or even, I mean, whatever, 20 some odd minutes per game versus navigating 12 minutes per game or 10 minutes per game. And it's like, where's the happy medium? So the reason I'm answering your question with this is because I think the answer to your question depends on the answer to my question. Mm-hmm. Because if you think like, hey, that no longer that ace in the hole, that no longer becomes our baseline. That is now we're going to pull it out when we need to, and we are confident enough that we'll be able to, you know, do enough defensively during those limited stretches. And I don't know.
So that so that it's not really a pivot as much as or if it's a pivot, it's a very slight one. It's like, this is still what we do, but it's just not what we have to do all the time.
Yeah, and it just becomes like, it's like I went before the season, I went back and looked at like how many minutes the death lineup in Golden State played during the regular season. Then I went back and looked at how many minutes they played during the playoffs. And they definitely played more minutes in the playoffs. But even in the postseason, like they didn't play. It's not like they were playing the death lineups like 20 some odd minutes a game. That was still something that they did less than more.
I know you're not comparing it to the death lineup. The thing about the death lineup was it might have been better defensively than it was offensively.
Yes, no, but I'm not
like, I know you're not comparing it. I just want to make that point
not,
because it's important to say, like, I'm not sure. Is there a difference between the lineup in short stints than there is in long stints? Is it just fundamentally maybe not the lineup we thought it was?
Well, the reason I brought up the death lineup is because the one thing the death lineup did not do very well was rebound. And I think the longer you saw them go out there and play more and more minutes together, the more it opened up to, all right, we're going to get hard on the boards. And teams would start to get used to it. Well, it's also
you're forcing Draymond to play. He's 6'5". Like he's amazing. But you're forcing him to play center for. It's very different to ask him to do that for 12 minutes a game as opposed to 30. But
so this gets back to my point about if it's only for a shorter stretch per game.
But okay, then what? If it's for a shorter stretch per game, then what? Then Cat's going to play harder defensively. Then Brunson's going to get better defense. Like. For that lineup, it's like, all right, Draymond maybe can't be the everywhere center for 30 minutes a game, but man, I know he can do it for 12. Yeah. And when he does it for 12, it's the best lineup of all time. What's the thing for Cat or for this lineup that's like, man, if we can ask them to scramble for 12 minutes a game, like maybe we're super aggressive in our coverages, but we can't do that for 30 minutes because that's asking too much of OG and Mikal on the back end.
Kind of.
But we've seen that it hasn't worked. Like we've seen it. Like. Now, maybe that might be the answer, though. Like maybe it's we can't create a defense that can work for 30 minutes, but we can get super high octane for 10 to 12 minutes a game and blitz everything. And OG and Mikal for those 12 minutes a game just need to be everywhere, and Hart need to be everywhere. That's not insane. Maybe there's something there. Maybe there's something.
I guess what I'm thinking of is the possessions where we've seen Towns be really active defensively. And knowing that that's there somewhere in there.
Right.
And so is it something that you can, if you go to him and you're like, look, dude, we need this from you for like 5 minutes a half, you know?
Yeah.
Or something like the key.
Let me
5
just say, like the other thing about bringing in, let's say, a center to support Cat defensively is who's Jalen Brunson guarding? So Cat's now going to move to the 4 and guard the least
threatening opposing
dangerous wing, which is what he did in Minnesota, essentially. Where does Brunson go? So now Brunson's guarding. So if Towns is guarding Isaac Okoro or Dean Wade, Brunson's guarding Darius Garland.
Yeah.
You run out of hiding spots.
Yep.
Or if, well, maybe because Mobley's in there, but like depending on the lineup, right? Like I can name a bunch of teams where like there's usually not two unthreatening.
So what are the matchups against Boston?
Boston's an issue anyway. It doesn't matter what you do, but like, yeah, I mean, there's you could name a bunch of them, right? Like it's that's the other thing. Like Minnesota had the personnel around Cat. Like, okay, Gobert's guarding the center, Cat's guarding whoever. Conley's a solid. Conley, they didn't mind putting Conley on the ball. Like Conley's going to navigate pick and rolls. Now he's old, but like I can put Conley on Darius Garland and feel okay about it. Can you put Jalen Brunson there? Maybe some of this is like we need to challenge Brunson to like do a little more. And by the way, as much as I understand that some of the numbers support that Brunson's been okay defensively this year, stop going under screens. Like it happens twice a game where he unnecessarily goes under a screen, gives up a 3. Like I know he's trying to draw that offensive foul, which he got one again last night on John Collins.
He did get one.
But you know, like he's got to challenge himself a bit too. Like you're now not the only weak link, and you have to maybe take a step up in that department, especially because theoretically the offensive load is lessened a little bit. So you maybe pick it up defensively. So these are all the complicated questions that you got to ask, because it's again comes back to this fundamental structural issue which is that when in baseball, they talk about the defense up the middle, right? They talk about catcher, shortstop, center field, right? And you have point guard, center, who are challenged defensively, and can the Knicks somehow find a way, whether it's through personnel changes like we just talked about, whether it's through schematic changes that we've already talked about, whether it's through guys just getting better, which we've talked about, just find a way to scrape together that defense that we are hoping they can find.
Okay. Let's give out some game balls and detentions and get the hell out of here. The quick conversation that I wanted to take 2 minutes took 10, of course. Okay. Game ball. I know that's exactly what I wanted. Why I wanted to have it. Game ball given out. I'm doing this off the top of my head, Andrew. I apologize. To a player, coach, or entity that did something noteworthy that we want to praise this week. Benjy, on behalf of Jeremy Cohen, who won the week because I foolishly picked 2-0 for the Knicks, you get to go first here. So who are you giving your game ball to?
There are a few things I know that Jeremy Cohen likes more than a minimum guy performing above his minimum salary. Another brilliant signing by the New York Knicks. I mean, it's proving itself. Campaign gets my game ball for having a truly significant impact in, I think, every game he's played, certainly this week. And going back, I think now a couple weeks. And look, they closed with him last night. We talked about that. And I want to give him credit, not just for the shot making, which has been great. Defensively, he's been really solid and really disruptive. And using those long arms of his and giving the energy they need off the bench. So shout out to you, campaign, for once again proving this front office is really good on the margins. Now, I hope they didn't mess up the big moves, but they're really good on the margins.
Well, we'll find out soon enough, I'm sure. One good sub deserves another. I will give my game ball to Jericho Sims. Jericho Sims was widely slandered and derided. I'm not sure that I always did my best to fend off the slings and arrows during some post games. I may have.
You didn't.
I didn't do a great job. And a lot of that was over the top. And he's been good. He's been good. And the fact that we have gone over the span of literally the span of like a week, to we had super chats being like, it is egregious that Jericho Sims is playing basketball right now, to why did Jericho Sims not play more in this game? That's baseball, Susan. So my game ball goes to Jericho Sims.
My man Jericho. Yeah, he's been really good. He's been really good over the last couple of weeks. Credit to him, man. Been a beast around the rim, defensively, offensive rebounding well, setting bone crunching screens. Love it. Love Jericho. Look at that bench, New York bench. Who would have thought?
Without Deuce, without Precious, without Mitch,
what's going on with Deuce, man? Like, why are these injuries lingering like this?
I don't. They're being cautious, I guess. I don't know. Hopefully, Deuce, come back for Denver, please. Okay, now it's time for not game ball, but detention given to a player, coach, or entity who needs to sit down and think about what they did for a while. I will be giving my detention. It's going to be a shocker to you, Benjy, to Mikal Bridges. For all the reasons that we talked about earlier in this episode. This is as much a culmination of a season's worth of efforts from Mikal. Like, it is weird at this point, and I'm not like he is going to be. I know he's going to be fine. Like, there are players this good. I keep going back to it. This good and this hardworking. We know he's a hard worker. We know he cares about the right things. Like, he will figure it out, but it would be great if he could do that sooner rather than later. So, Mikal, you go 3 for 15, you get put in detention for a little while.
Yeah, hard to argue that one. Would have been my pick. I guess I'll go with THIBS.
Sure. I don't know.
I don't know who else deserves attention, really. Like, Cat had a bad game last night, but he's been quite good. Yeah, I'll give it to THIBS. I thought the Jericho Sims first half minutes were egregious. At altitude, And I would like to see more switching, as we talked about. So let's start to get a look at that. And I think we rightfully pointed out early in the season, everyone was like, drop, so stupid, drop. Like Tibbs builds it out, right? He starts there. You got to look at drop. He's building it out to a more hedging and blitzing. Maybe now the next step is seeing a little bit how switching looks. But I do think he's slowly building out the defense. And I hope I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that there will be more switching at some point and we'll get a look at it. But until that point, he's in detention.
It's very fair. Everybody's got to be better. And the first person who would say that would be Tom Thibodeau. Okay. Next up, predictions. As noted, I lost. So I stink. We are predicting the results of 4 games. So we are at Denver. That is Monday, 9:00 tip-off. At Dallas, that is thank the good Lord for this. A 7:30 tip-off. That's an ESPN game, by the way. Friday, Black Friday, noon.
Whoa. I didn't know this.
What is happening in Charlotte?
This allows me to watch, Jonathan. This is wonderful for me.
No, I'm excited if you get to watch. Listen, my wife will certainly be out shopping somewhere, and I don't care where she is or what she's doing because I'm going to be home watching that game and then doing the post game. And then Sunday versus the New Orleans Pelicans or whatever is currently left of the New Orleans Pelicans. That is the return home game. That is a 6 p.m. start. So
the pelican has been ripped apart by ravaging birds. It's picking at its skin slowly. Its bones are exposed.
I mean, you could have won a few bucks if you would have predicted that we'd be sitting here. I don't know, however many, not quite a quarter of the way into the NBA season, but like a goodly amount of the way into the NBA season, and predicting that the Pelicans are one of the, let's see. They're the last place team in the West. Or how about this? You predicting that the Pelicans and the Sixers would be 2 of the 3 worst teams in the league. That's where we're at. Anyway.
Once again, Elfrid Payton starting more games than Emmanuel Quickly. Hate to see that.
That was good. You go first. I think I know where you're going to go with this, but I'm curious.
Sheesh. I'll say 2-2.
That's where I thought you were gonna go. Okay. I'm not going 1-3, so I'll go 3-1. I wouldn't have liked going 2-2, but I probably would have gone 2-2.
I was right in between because Denver's playing really well. Denver's a really tough place to play. So I think if I had to guess now, I'd say they're going to lose that game. And the Cat doesn't play, then they're in trouble. But then I know Luka didn't play tonight, right? So I don't know what his status is. But
yeah, Luka is out Luka will be out for the next game.
He will be out. Oh man,
yeah. And
I might have gone 3-1. Damn it!
Do you want to change?
No. I'm already in. That's funny. I didn't realize he was already declared out.
By the way, bad. I don't know if I said bad loss. The Mavs were up by 1. Kyrie got fouled with 8 seconds remaining, and he missed one of the 2 free throws. And then Butler tied it with a dunk, sent it to overtime, and the Heat dominated the overtime period.
Don't you hate to see that? Oh, that's rough.
Well, I don't love that the Heat benefited from it. I will say
no,
that.
I don't either. I don't either.
But
on a personal level. Yeah, good point that they did lose. The Knicks did lose to Dallas last year without Luka when Kyrie went nuts on him. So
maybe a little payback.
Certainly not a gimme game in Dallas. But had I known Luka was out,
okay, I'm giving you the chance to change it. You can change it.
I'm going to stick 2-2. I'm going to stick 2-2. And then it's New Orleans, which they should absolutely win, and the 12:00 game against Charlotte, which they should absolutely win.
Yeah.
So, all right, I'll stick with 2-2, but I was right in between.
All right. Well, I think we both hope that I'm going to be right on this one.
Yes, sir.
Actually, we both hope that I'm wrong and they go 4-0, but wouldn't that be nice? Okay. Benjy, this was great. Anything more before we get out of here?
No, nothing more. I'll have a film session out on Thursday, which I guess will be after Dallas. So I'll be breaking down the Dallas game. So that's exciting on the Knicks Film School YouTube channel. So keep an eye out for that good stuff. And otherwise, yeah, you know where I am. So thanks all. Thanks for having me, Jon.
Benjy, it's the pleasure's all mine. Andrew, anything we forgot?
No, I will say Benjy and I need to have a conversation about his film session this week because he just said Thursday like it's not Thanksgiving, and whether we'll be doing a film session on Thursday is going to depend on whether my wife allows me to get away. But there will be a film session this week. We promise we'll get you there. Check out DJs if you haven't yet, and shout out to Benjy and DJ who have been killing it on these film sessions lately. Ryan Blackburn of Mile High Sports, also the co-host of Locked On Nuggets, will join me for a pregame pod live on the Knicks Film School YouTube channel at 11 a.m. Eastern. So join us. We usually go about 40 minutes. We answer questions live. If you have questions about this matchup or about the Nuggets, he'll be sure to answer them. Nice little adjustment we've made, switching the pod to a day of live format. So join me on Monday, and then obviously join Jon on the post game after the Knicks play in Denver.
Love it. Okay. Thank you, Benjy. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everybody out there, for checking out another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. We will be back with all the things that Andrew just told you. Until then, take care, enjoy the start of your week, and we will be back with more fun and games very soon.